Part 20. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 191. Send me to the hospital quickly, Gao Ji said angrily, covering his thigh. He didn't expect that the other party would dare to shoot in public. Aren't they afraid of the Japanese police? He had never seen any of the four people just now, but judging from their accents, they should be from Xiangjiang. Check, tell me where they live. Brother, I think I know the woman next to that person. She seems to be a mama-san from Shinjuku Kabukicho. The younger brother said hesitantly, he was not sure whether it was true or not. Gao Ji's eyes flashed fiercely, maid, go check on this matter first. You must investigate it thoroughly before making any plans. The gunshot wound on his leg reminded him that the other person was ruthless and no ordinary person. Ajah's face was covered in blood, and the flesh and blood on his face was horrifying. He slowly squatted down and looked at the Tainan gang members who fell on the ground. No. Don't kill me. The members of the Tainan gang showed fear in their eyes and kept begging Ajah not to shoot. Haha, you were the one who caught me just now. Ajah grinned, raised the gun in his hand and shot towards the man's right hand. Then the left hand, the right leg, the left leg. The indifference on Ajah's face made other members of the East China group feel frightened until he shot the opponent's head off. Ajah touched the hideous wound on his face, and a feeling called excitement spread in his heart. So this is what killing feels like. Ajah saw the people around him looking at him in fear, and felt an indescribable feeling of joy in his heart. It turns out that it feels so good to be afraid. He knew that the man had brought these to him. Ajah slowly came to Li Qing, plop, knelt down on the ground, holding the pistol in both hands. Brother. Li Qing chuckled and looked at Ajah's 80% loyalty value entry. Let's go. Ajah stood up and slowly followed Crow and the others away. He seemed not to have heard the shouts from the East China group behind him. Brother, why didn't you just kill the boss of the Tainan gang? Crow scratched his head. According to his eldest brother's temper, he shouldn't let the Tainan gang go so easily. Lily also looked at Li Qing curiously when she heard this. You can't kill him, that will benefit the East China group, Ajah said suddenly. Li Qing nodded appreciatively. It was indeed true. Killing the boss of the Tainan gang by himself would only provide strong conditions for the rise of the East China group. His current idea is to build a new young force in Chinatown that is bloody and courageous, not a loose violent group that retreats when difficulties arise. Ajah, tell me about the young people around Chinatown. Ajah heard his elder brother's words and thought carefully for a moment. Brother, I don't know if you have heard of such a group of people in Japan. They are war orphans and are not recognized by the Japanese. Most of them are of mixed Chinese and Japanese descent. They speak Chinese, but they have great hatred for the Japanese. Malice. Li Qing frowned. He had heard of it, and there were many such people in Japan, and they were basically discriminated against in Japan. There used to be many young people like this who wanted to join the East China group, but were rejected by the East China group. Ajah went on to say that these people are like lonely souls who are not accepted by both sides and are struggling to survive in the cracks. Okay, I don't care what method you use to recruit these people, they will be our new force in Japan. Li Qing knew what Ajah meant and immediately agreed with him. If you need anything, feel free to contact Crow. After hearing this, Ajah nodded towards Crow, and shouted respectfully, Brother Crow. Well, do it well, Applejack. At this time, Kazuo Kusagari received the news and also learned that Li Qing and others had fired a gun in Chinatown. He shook his head angrily. Li Qing is really unscrupulous. Jingbian, please contact the police station over at China Street and suppress this matter. After hearing this, Taro Ibe felt furious. His teacher was beaten to death, and he had to help Li Qing wipe his ass. It was a great shame and humiliation. Your Excellency, President, Mr. Takashita's death. Ibana has always been worried about the death of his teacher. He really couldn't accept it. The teacher who had taught him since childhood was beaten to death by Li Cheng. Huh? Humph. Everything is for the organization. Although Kazuo Kusagari also criticized Li Cheng a little, now is not the time to fall out. At the very least, he must get over this difficulty first. Forget it, let Nanako Kusanagi accompany Li Cheng to visit Tokyo tomorrow. At least let him calm down and stop causing any trouble during this time in Tokyo. It seems that Nanako is also very interested in Li Cheng. If there is anything between the two of them, it will be more beneficial to the development of the organization. Let's not say that the Japanese are perverted, even sacrificing their own daughters for profit. But he didn't notice an inexplicable look flashing in Jingbian's eyes. The next day, 5-star hotel, Li Cheng's room. Lily heard the doorbell ringing and opened the door. Nanako Kusanagi looked at the woman in cool pajamas and frowned. Is this Li Cheng's room? Lily was stunned for a moment when she saw Nanako, and then replied, Who are you? Hello, I am Cao Kao Nanako. Nanako behaved very politely, and she could tell that the relationship between the woman and Li Cheng was unusual. But she didn't mind, she was confident in herself. As a mama-san, Lily has the ability to read people's expressions and knows that the woman in front of her seems to be her rival. She deliberately straightened her proud bust and tucked her hair behind her ears charmingly. She whispered slowly, Brother Ching, I'm looking for you. Kusakari Nanako smiled and squeezed into the room without any care, stepping into the room in small steps on wooden clogs. Li Cheng was also stunned when he saw Nanako wearing a kimono. He didn't expect Nanako to come to him. Sir Li Cheng, do you have time today? I'll take you to see the scenery of Japan. Lily pouted her lips and knew that this Japanese girl was not easy to deal with. She was right. As a woman from a gangster family, she was definitely not as harmless as she looked. Nanako also knew that she could not escape the fate of being used by her father for marriage. In this case, it would be better to find someone she likes. And Li Cheng was her target, and the first man she had ever taken a fancy to. Li Cheng looked at Nanako and smiled, Okay, I have nothing to do today so I can go sightseeing in Tokyo. Nanako was delighted when she heard that, and glanced at Lily standing next to her. Lily, go to, Li Cheng said with a smile. Lily smiled proudly, pretending that half of her suspender silk pajamas accidentally fell off, revealing most of her roundness. She deliberately rubbed Li Cheng's arm, I'll listen to you, Brother Cheng. Nanako pretended to be indifferent, but the curve did make her a little envious. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Bulletin Liang. Chapter 192. This time Li Cheng did not bring Wu Wu, but asked Wu Wu and others to help Aja arrange to recruit new people. After getting into the car specially arranged by the Yamaguchi group, Li Cheng took his 2 daughters on a one-day trip to Tokyo. Your Excellency Li Cheng, this is the world-famous Mount Fuji. It is the highest peak in Japan and one of the largest active volcanoes in the world. Li Cheng looked at the indescribable mountain and whispered, Active volcano? When will it erupt? It made Lily next to her smile. Nanako glared at Lily with dissatisfaction, now is not the right time to come. If we come in April, there will be cherry blossoms everywhere, very beautiful. Li Cheng sang, this is Tokyo Tower. Aya sang, this is the famous Ueno Park. Brother Cheng, Ryogoku Kokujikan has arrived. Lily rolled her eyes in anger, she didn't expect the daughter of the Yamaguchi Gumi boss to be so shameless. It only took most of a day to get from Mr. Li Cheng to Brother Cheng. Ryoku Kokujikan. Li Cheng frowned and looked at the slightly majestic Kokujikan. Well, this is where Japan's sumo wrestling competitions take place. Not far away, Taro Ibe, who was acting as the driver, looked at Li Qing with a sneer. He chose this place deliberately. Because Musashi Maru, a Yokozuna-level sumo wrestler here, is his junior brother, the two of them studied under Takeshita Jun's family since they were young. However, Musashi Maru had better sumo wrestling talent, and at Takeshita Shun's suggestion, he specialized in sumo wrestling. Now he is a relatively famous Yokozuna-level player. It's a pity that today is a closed day, otherwise I could have watched a sumo match with Brother Cheng. Nanako shook her head regretfully. It doesn't matter. If Mr. Li Qing wants to visit, our Yamaguchi Gumi still has some energy. Taro Ibe came over with a smile. Li Qing raised his eyebrows. Since you have already made arrangements, let's go take a look. Although he didn't know what kind of medicine was sold in the gourd by the well, he decided to take advantage of it and find an opportunity to kill this disgusting fly. Several people walked into the Kokujikan, which was empty except for two sumo wrestlers fighting against each other. No, it's not so much a confrontation as it is one party playing with the other. Chinese people come here. Chinese people come here. Musashi Maru shouted loudly at the sumo wrestler on the opposite side, followed by a series of Japanese words. It seems that this sumo wrestler is of Chinese origin. Taro Ibe glanced at Li Qing with a sneer. What did he say? Li Qing asked in a deep voice. Nanako's face was livid, her lips pursed, but she never made a sound. Lily's face turned red with anger and she translated, Chinese, an inferior nation. Your Excellency Li Qing, don't mind. The sumo wrestler opposite him is Mongolian, not Chinese. The well smiled teasingly, as if this was a victory for him, thinking that he had humiliated Li Qing. While talking, the Mongolian player on the opposite side had been defeated. Musashi Maru beat his chest with both hands and roared throughout the Kokujikan. Then he made a thumbs down gesture towards Li Qing. Li Qing smiled and glanced at the well. It's a cheap way to motivate generals, but I have to say it's very useful. Nanako looked at Taro Ibe angrily. What do you want to do, Ibe? Do you want to provoke a war between the Yamaguchi Gumi and the New World? At this time, Ibe Taro stopped pretending. He killed my teacher, and I want to keep him in Japan. Don't worry, Miss Nanako, as long as he dies, there will be plenty of people to deal with the New World. Noisy. Li Qing kicked the edge of the well away with a side kick, slowly took off his suit, handed it to Lily, and rolled up the shirt sleeves. Careful. Lily looked at Li Qing worriedly and said softly. Qing Sang, this is all a misunderstanding. I will definitely tell my father. Please believe me. These are all made by Jingbian. Nanako said anxiously. Li Qing ignored it and stepped forward step by step. Musashi Maru was a head taller than him, and his body weight was 2 to 3 times his. I saw Musashi Maru getting into a sumo wrestling stance and stamping his right foot vigorously, causing dust to fly around him. Li Qing smiled disdainfully. I am afraid that this level of strength cannot push him. With a loud roar, Musashi Maru rushed over like a heavy motorcycle. Li Qing stepped lightly on his foot, instantly rose into the air and landed on Musashi Maru's neck. Musashi Maru felt his neck sink, and a pair of strong hands grabbed his neck. He quickly waved his hands to knock Li Qing down. It's a pity that Li Qing didn't give him a chance. Holding Musashi Maru's greasy head with both hands, he twisted it hard. Lily and Nanako's pupils shrank instantly, as if they had seen something terrifying. Even when he fell on the ground by the well, he showed a horrified expression. He only saw blood pouring out of Musashi Maru's headless neck like a fountain. Demon. He was instantly incontinent and rubbed his legs back hard, but Li Qing's kick just now made him unable to move. Li Qing sneered, grabbing the bun on Musashi Maru's head and tossing it gently. Musashi Maru's head rolled over with a gurgling expression, and his dead expression made Inbitaro's heart tremble. I want to thank you. I haven't killed someone so happily in a long time. Li Qing licked his lips. Ever since the younger brothers became more and more numerous and stronger, he had already healed and had not taken action. Put. Before Jingbian could finish his words, Li Qing's whip had arrived. The whole head of the man at the well had been kicked to pieces. The white and red stuff sprayed on the wall. You. The two girls vomited out in tacit agreement this time. Li Qing took the suit from Lily and looked at the bloody scene at the Kokujikan. Sumo? Ha. He felt very good now, but it was a pity that the driver died. Li Qing had to take a taxi back with the two girls. Nanako, tell your father the truth. This matter was instigated by your Yamaguchi Gumi. Ask him if he is ready for war. Li Qing said to Nanako in the car. In fact, Li Qing had his own plan. He wanted to blackmail the Yamaguchi Gumi through this matter. He was betting that Kazuo Kusakari would not dare to turn against him now. Nanako nodded silently and got out of the car. Li Qing took Lily and continued to drive towards the hotel. Well, Lily, what is that for? The crowd outside the car surged, as if someone was parading. Lily looked out the window and read the slogans of the parade carefully. Although she had seen many such activities in Japan, as a Chinese, she couldn't help cursing. ICNMLGB, little devil. Unexpectedly, Lily cursed out loud, which made Li Qing feel a strange contrast. As if realizing that she was swearing, Lily blushed and explained, Brother Qing, they are Japanese right-wing forces, they are worshipping ghosts. At this time, Li Qing also saw the man walking in front, wearing the iconic fart hood, wearing the Japanese soldier uniform during World War II, and pulling out a knife and shouting something. Li Qing, who had just killed someone and was in a good mood, felt unhappy for a while. Do they have many such gatherings? Li Qing asked in a deep voice. About 1 or 2 times a month. Lily thought for a while and said. Li Qing nodded and said nothing, grinning in his heart. It seems that it's time for Tian Yangsheng to get some poison gas bombs. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 193. When Nanako Kusakari returned home, she saw her father Kazuo Kusakari sitting on the sofa reading a newspaper. Haha, Nanako is back. How are you having fun today? Kazuo Kusakari put down the newspaper in his hand and asked with a smile. With Nanako's character, if she didn't have a crush on Li Qing, she wouldn't have been able to spend the whole day with him. Father, Ibana took the initiative to take us to the Kokujikan. Nanako told Kazuo Kusagari the whole thing with a gloomy face. Kazuo Kusagari's face became more and more ugly. Bagayalu, how dare he, the bastard well. The coquettish operation at the well directly ruined the terms negotiated by the two parties. Li Qing even said harsh words. If he is not given an explanation for this matter, not only will the terms previously negotiated by the two parties be invalidated, but it will also cause a riot. An unnecessary dispute. These people by the well will not consider the organization at all. Takashita Shun will die as soon as he dies, and revenge will have to wait until this period of time has passed. Okay, Nanako, you go down first. He didn't want Nanako to get too involved in the Yamaguchi Gumi affairs. A trace of disappointment flashed in Nanako's eyes. As the daughter of the Yamaguchi Gumi president, she has the same desire to control power as her father. Nanako bowed slightly and walked upstairs on her wooden clogs. President, how about we increase the price of arms by a few %? Yamada, vice president of the Yamaguchi Gumi, asked tentatively. In his mind, Li Qing did this because he wanted more benefits. As long as the money was in place, everything was still negotiable. Kazuo Kusagari shook his head. In his opinion, Li Qing and his people were causing trouble everywhere in the past few days. It seemed to him that he must have ulterior motives. Coupled with the fact that they came into contact with the Japanese-Chinese violent group today, it is very likely that they have other ideas. Don't act rashly yet. Let me test Li Qing's tone first. Kazuo Kusagari decided to invite him to a gathering on the pretext of apologizing for Li Qing. No matter what Li Qing thought, he had to get the batch of arms first. At this time, Crow, Aja and others had already begun to take action. Brother Crow, those people smuggled over not long ago. Aja pointed to the dozen or so young people gathered in front of him. Crow squinted his eyes and saw that these people were obviously having a hard time. An oil drum was found in a dark alley, and wood picked up from somewhere was burned in the oil drum. The most important thing is that they are also grilling some messy meat that they got from somewhere, probably from some stray cat or dog. Tisk, tisk, it's really miserable, the crow muttered. Actually, these people have no relatives in Japan. For example, those of us who have acquaintances in Japan are basically taken to the gathering place in China Street as soon as they land Aja's side. After all, there was a mixed crowd at the gathering place, and even if the Japanese police came forward, it would be difficult to find anyone. These young people are much worse off than he was when he first came to Japan. These people are like stray dogs, driven around by Japanese gangsters and Japanese police. Let's go and have a look. Crow took Aja and F3 and walked towards the direction of the group of people. Crow and the others were also spotted on the opposite side, and they immediately became vigilant and cautious, with a fierce look in their eyes. When they got closer, Crow could see clearly that these people turned out to be young people with childish looks. The oldest one looked to be only 17 or 18 years old. Hey, stop. What are you doing? The leading young man was considered the more mature one. Watching Crow and others approaching, he pulled out a machete from the shelf next to him. Haha, don't be nervous, we are Chinese too. Crow walked forward with a smile. Upon hearing the Crow speaking Chinese, not only did the people on the other side not lower their guard, but all of them took out their weapons. It seems that for them, the threat posed by the Chinese is even greater than that of the Japanese. Crow frowned. This situation was very wrong. 12 children, armed with weapons, slowly surrounded a few people. Qian Liliang, why don't you just listen to me? Crow took out 2 guns from his waist and pointed them directly at the opposite side. When Aja and F3 saw Crow moving his gun, they all picked up their guns and aimed at the people opposite. When those people saw the gun, they all pushed forward a few steps and looked at the leader nervously. Bang Lang, the leading young man, dropped the machete in his hand and said in a bachelor's manner, "Brother, what do you want me to do?" Everyone else put down their weapons, and the atmosphere slowly calmed down. That's right, can't you just talk nicely? Crow shook the gun in his hand. Sure enough, my boss is right. You need to give these people a blow before they can sit down and talk to you properly. As for how to talk about it, just leave it to Aja directly. This is also what the elder brother ordered. Let's see if Aja can take on this important task. Aja didn't hesitate and walked forward directly to start communicating with the leading young man. After some exchanges, Aja generally grasped their information. There are probably more than 100 people in this group, distributed in various districts, and they mainly make a living by stealing. In addition, some of them are members of Nu Luo Quan. The so-called Nu Luo Quan is not a violent organization, but a loose alliance that sticks together for warmth, somewhat similar to the East China Group. The difference is that they hate the Japanese even more. Brother Crow, this is Kenji Yamamoto. Crow was stunned when he heard this. He didn't expect that the leader of this group of Chinese people was actually a Japanese teenager. Hello, Brother Crow. I am Kenji Yamamoto. Fluent Mandarin surprised Crow and others even more. After a brief understanding, they learned that this young man named Kenji Yamamoto had a Chinese mother and a father who was a gangster in a local Japanese gang. Tragically, his mother had died of illness and his father had died of an overdose of drugs. Because he knew Chinese, he had been hanging out with these smuggled teenagers for a long time and became their leader. "Well, are you interested in joining us?" Crow asked with interest. He believed that his boss would be very interested in Kenji Yamamoto. Kenji Yamamoto stammered, "I don't touch drugs." Since his father died of an overdose of drugs, he vowed not to touch drugs for the rest of his life. For ordinary gangs, drugs are the main means of profit. He felt repulsive to joining such a violent group. "Haha, don't worry, our eldest brother never touches flour." Crow felt that he got along well with Yamamoto Kenji, especially since this guy had the same bottom line as his boss. Yamamoto Kenji looked at Crow seriously and bowed deeply to him. "Brother Crow, we will follow you from now on." His brothers were so poor that they roasted stray cats to eat, so he was no longer reserved. Crow nodded and said nothing, but whether he could be accepted or not was up to his eldest brother to decide. "Okay, get up. You gather the people now, I'll take you to take a bath and buy some clothes. Then go to see the eldest brother." Yamamoto Kenji and others nodded excitedly. No matter what, they are now organized people. It's much better than the previous situation where people hated dogs. Hee, I guess you don't know who this Yamamoto Kenji is. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 194. Looking at the more than 50 young people standing opposite, Li Qing nodded with satisfaction. Aja was able to find a point of entry for the development of the organization in such a short time, and his ability is remarkable. What Li Qing needs now is these half-grown young men, who are passionate, brave and daring. As long as you give them a chance to stand out, the sky can poke a hole for you. "Aja, Yamamoto, you two kneel down," Crow said seriously. Li Qing plans to formally accept 2 people this time. As for the others, wait until they have made contributions. Everyone looked at the 2 people kneeling on the ground with envy, and they also wanted to stand out. "The rules of our organization are not very big, and the most important thing is not to betray the organization and Brother Cheng." Crow plays the role of the big head, but he really can't remember the messy gang rules. He had to wait until the 2 went to Hong Kong for further study to let the big head influence them again. "Well, from now on, Aja will be responsible for recruiting new Chinese, and Yamamoto, you will be responsible for Nuluaquan." Yamamoto was stunned for a moment. He understood that Aja was responsible for the Chinese, but Nuluaquan did not belong to his own organization. "Yamamoto, I will give you 2 days to take down Nuluaquan. I don't care if you use coercion, inducement, or force. You must take it down," Li Qing said solemnly. This is also an important part of his plan. Once Nuluaquan is taken down, the road ahead will be easy. Why not East China Group but Nuluaquan? Li Qing naturally has his own considerations. Nuluaquan is mostly composed of young people. If all of them can be recruited, the combat effectiveness of the organization will be greatly improved. The East China Group has always been watched by the Tainan Gang, the Triads, etc. If they take action, they may attract the attention of local gangs. Yamamoto Kenji gritted his teeth. "Okay, brother, rest assured, I will definitely take down Nuluaquan within 2 days." Based on his understanding of Nuluaquan, this matter is not very difficult. What the Nuluaquan organization actually lacks is a sense of identity. As long as this point is grasped, it can be incorporated without bloodshed. "You too, if you need anything, please contact Crow at any time." Li Qing waved his hand and let these people retreat. "Wait for the younger brothers to go out." "Crow, is Ao coming soon?" Li Qing asked in a deep voice. "Brother, on the way, by water." Crow bent his waist and whispered. Li Qing nodded. This time AO and others came, and he didn't want them to have entry and exit records. He had to go through his own smuggling channels. Although the time was a bit slow, it was more secretive. By the way, brother. Yamaguchi Gumi Kazuo Kusakari invited you to dinner tomorrow night. Crow suddenly remembered this matter. Li Qing frowned, then relaxed. It seemed that Kusakari Kazuo wanted to talk. If he could talk, he was a good comrade. But Li Qing had already decided that while he was right, he would cut a piece of meat from the Yamaguchi Gumi this time. Chinatown, East China Group. What? Aja, followed that group of people. Tito looked at Xiang Jiangzi in disbelief. Xiang Jiangzi glanced at Tito. Don't say that group of people, that's the boss of the Xiangjiang Society. It's just that the boss doesn't like me, otherwise I would follow him, Xiang Jiangzi said enviously. As a northeasterner, Tito certainly didn't know how lucky Aja was to follow Li Qing. Xiang Jiangzi was also unconvinced, and didn't know what kind of luck that coward Aja had, and he was actually favored by that boss, which was simply a meteoric rise. Why didn't you stop them? Stop them? If that boss hadn't taken action, Aja would have been beaten to death, and you weren't there at that time. Tebeo looked at Tito complainingly. These people were all led by Tito, and no one dared to take the lead without Tito. I'll go find him. Tito had a close relationship with Aja, and he decided to go find Aja to ask about the situation. Just as he was about to walk out the door, his sleeve was pulled by Xiang Jiangzi. Tito, look. Xiangjiang pointed to the front and said in a low voice. Tito looked up and saw a large number of people from the Tainan gang holding machetes, steel pipes, and other weapons in their hands and surrounding the East China Group. Get your weapons, Tito shouted. People from the East China Group took out weapons from the shops one after another. Both sides fought in a group in Chinatown, and at first there was a back and forth. But slowly the people from the East China Group began to show signs of decline. After all, they were all ordinary people before, and compared with the old gangsters, they still lacked a bit of ruthlessness. After being hacked several times in succession, the morale dropped. It was only with Tito's skills that they managed to hold out against the Tainan gang. Tito, run! Xiang Jiangzi shouted while supporting the bloody Tebeo. Tito looked around and saw that the Huadong group had already fled and scattered, and was defeated. Gao Ji, the leader of the Tainan gang, supported by two younger brothers, shouted, "Find me that bastard that day." He was obviously looking for Aja. He was shot in the thigh by Jin Dazhong last time. If he didn't retaliate, what face would Gao Ji have in this area? Tell me, where is the guy named Aja? Gao Ji stepped on the member of the Huadong group who fell to the ground, and a shrill scream rang out. I really don't know. Tito heard the scream from a distance, and felt sorry for it, so he stood up and was about to step forward. Don't go, it's useless. Xiang Jiangzi sighed and shook his head. The gap between the East China Group and the Tainan gang was too big. Compared with the Tainan gang, they are no different than lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Seeing that he couldn't figure out what it was, Gao Ji stood up and said loudly, You guys, what are you talking about, the East China Group? I tell you that this place will be the territory of the Tainan gang from now on. He finally revealed his ultimate goal, using the reason of this injury to completely capture Chinatown with the support of Iguchi Toshinari. This is not giving me any way to survive, Xiang Jiangzi said angrily. He also knew that once the territory was controlled by the Tainan gang, life for them would be even more difficult. Especially family members who make a living in Chinatown will also receive harassment from the Tainan gang. I'm going to find Toshinari Iguchi. Tito thought for a long time and blurted out. Iguchi Toshinari is the husband of his ex-girlfriend Xiaoxiu, and he is going to give it a try no matter what. Are you crazy? The backstage of the Tainan gang is Iguchi Tozei. Is it any use for you to find him? Xiang Jiangzi felt that Titushiu was funny. Why should someone help you because you are their wife's ex-boyfriend? Funny. If that's the case, it's better to go find the big boss. Maybe he has some ideas. Xiang Jiangzi muttered quietly, he still believed in his fellow countrymen compared to the Japanese. The two argued constantly, and neither could convince the other, so they decided to find their own way. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 195. The next day, at night, Li Qing brought Crow to Kazuo Kuzakuri's house as promised. Haha, Mr. Li Qing, welcome. Kazuo Kusakari came out with Nanako to greet them. President Kusakari, you're welcome. Thanks to you, I'm fine. Li Qing narrowed his eyes and squeezed Kazuo Kusakari. Kazuo Kusakari is indeed a shameless old man, his face didn't even blush. Mr. Li Qing, please believe in the sincerity of our Yamaguchi Gumi. That was Jingbian's own decision, and it has nothing to do with the Yamaguchi Gumi. Kazuo Kusakari didn't know anything and wanted to get away with it. Li Qing looked at Kazuo Kusakari with a half-smile in his eyes. I understand that there are inevitably bad apples in the organization. For example, Crow has secretly contacted Sumiyoshi Kai these days. Alas, it's unfortunate for the family. Crow looked at his nose with his eyes and looked at his heart with his face, knowing his mistakes. But in his heart, there was a big black question mark. Brother, you lie without thinking, when did I contact Sumiyoshi Kai? After hearing this, Kazuo Kusakari looked a little unnatural. He found that Li Qing was indeed difficult to deal with. President Kusakari, don't mind, after all, we are close allies, I will not accept other people's arms orders for the time being. Li Qing looked at Kazuo Kusakari with a smile on his face, and specifically pointed out the arms transaction in his words. Kazuo Kusakari also laughed and hugged Li Qing's shoulders enthusiastically. Of course, I believe in brother Li Qing. The wine and food are ready, let's go. Li Qing blinked at Nanako. In just a few seconds, he was a generation older than Nanako. He also fully witnessed the shamelessness of the Japanese. Both sides sat down. Kazuo Kusakari was kneeling, and Li Qing was sitting cross-legged. Brother Li, as an apology, I'll give you 20% more for the price of the arms this time. Kazuo Kusakari raised the wine glass in his hand and said softly. No, the original price is fine. Li Qing waved his hand and pretended not to care. It's just that the inspections have been strict recently, especially overseas, so the transportation time may be a little slower. He said with an embarrassed look. Kazuo Kusakari smiled stiffly. This damn Li Qing took his casino license and wanted to blackmail him. If it's later, he is afraid that all the overseas Yamaguchi Gumi members will be killed. Brother Li, see if you can use special channels. After all, time is money. Kazuo Kusakari suppressed his anger and asked softly. Well, I recently got a girlfriend. She wants to rent a place in Kabukicho, Shinjuku, and open a street of style. Li Qing took a sip of wine and said calmly. Kazuo Kuzakuri's face twitched. What the hell? Opening a store is fine, but a street? Li Qing investigated the Yamaguchi Gumi thoroughly and knew that it had a street in Kabukicho, Shinjuku. Of course, this is just her ideal. In fact, her biggest ideal is to go to Las Vegas. Kazuo Kusakari was furious. This little bastard, every word is full of threats, it's really hateful. Since my sister-in-law has a request, then try to meet it. It happens that our Yamaguchi Gumi has a street in Shinjuku, which can be rented to her first. Li Qing smiled when he heard it. Jingzhou was borrowed, and he and others also had a place to stay temporarily. But Kazuo Kuzakuri's words made Nanako Kusakari next to him unhappy. That hateful woman was a generation older than him. Okay, President Kusakari is straightforward, I will give you a 95% discount on this batch of arms. Li Qing smiled and nodded. After eating and drinking, Li Qing left Kazuo Kusakari's house with Crow. Crow looked at his boss in the car with respect in his eyes. Swindler, a real profiteer, if I had this ability, I would have become Li Kaorin long ago. You know, half a month's rent for a street is equivalent to half of this. By the way, how are Aja and Yamamoto doing? Li Qing asked curiously. Although it was only a day, he was eager to know the situation of Nuluaquan. Well, Aja is fine. Yamamoto seems to be in a bit of trouble. Some people in Nuluaquan don't want to be incorporated, but want to take the opportunity to take down Yamamoto and others. Crow thought about it and narrated to Li Qing the situation reported by Yamamoto. Li Qing smiled and shook his head. This Yamamoto is still a child. After all, he is not Chinese and has not received traditional education since childhood. Tell Yamamoto to kill the leader of the other party, give him $1 million in cash and let him buy the rest of the people. One hand is a carrot and the other hand is a big stick. The moves that the first-grade class monitor in elementary school will use, the Japanese will not use. Hearing this, Crow nodded. Li Qing did not speak again, but closed his eyes and thought. He was thinking about the gangs in Japan, how to develop the next step. Nanako Kusakari. He suddenly thought of this woman, who was not as harmless as she seemed. Li Qing could see the desire for power in her eyes. Unfortunately, she was a girl, and was not valued by Kazuo Kusakari, who even did not let her get involved in the affairs of the organization. Huh? Isn't that Xiang Jiangzi? Crow looked at Xiang Jiangzi curiously, who was standing at the door of the hotel and blowing the cold wind. Xiang Jiangzi also saw Li Qing getting off the car, his face was happy, and he walked up quickly. He had been waiting here for more than 3 hours. Master Qing. Xiang Jiangzi bowed his head and greeted him. Well, Xiang Jiangzi, what's the matter? Li Qing was also a little curious about Xiang Jiangzi's arrival. Master Qing, the Tainan gang attacked us today and completely drove us out of Chinatown. After hearing this, Li Qing smiled and didn't react. The East China group has no ability and no courage, and will be driven out sooner or later. Why do you come to me? Xiang Jiangzi scratched his face embarrassedly. We want you to help us. Li Qing chuckled and looked at Xiang Jiangzi. Why should I help you? What's the benefit to me? Don't you want to establish your own power in Japan? Mastering Chinatown is equivalent to mastering the Chinese in Tokyo. Xiang Jiangzi explained. He didn't believe that Li Qing would have no interest in this matter. Li Qing shook his head. Taking over Chinatown was a must, but he didn't want to recruit these burdens. Titu, he went to find Jiangkao Lycan of the Triad. Xiang Jiangzi's words caught Li Qing's attention. The intervention of local Japanese gangs is bound to make the situation in Chinatown more complicated. Iguchi Toshinari? This is a good opportunity. Li Qing's eyes lit up, and he suddenly thought of an idea. You go back and wait for my news. I will let Crow notify you if there is any situation. Li Qing looked at Crow, who nodded and gave the contact information to Xiang Jiangzi. Xiang Jiangzi was excited. He believed that as long as Li Qing intervened, Chinatown would not fall into the hands of Tainan gang. Crow sent Xiang Jiangzi out the door and came to Li Qing. Brother, do we really want to help them? Li Qing knocked on the table slowly, and the sound of bang 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 rang out in the room. Crow knew that his brother was thinking, so he walked out quietly and closed the door gently. Li Qing looked up at the ceiling. Yamaguchi Gumi, Triad, Tainan Gang, Huadong Group. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Banwanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 196. Iguchi Group, Iguchi Tozei Office. Mr. Iguchi, this is the situation. Titu sat opposite Iguchi Tozei and whispered. Iguchi Toshinari looked at Titu opposite and knew that he was his wife's boyfriend in China. But Titu came to him for help, but he didn't expect it. Titu, are you saying that the Tainan group violated the regulations and began to fully occupy Chinatown? Iguchi Toshinari asked knowingly. In fact, Tainan Gang Gaoji had already greeted him, and his invasion of Chinatown was approved by Jiangguke. But Iguchi Tozei had new ideas after seeing Titu. Recently, the Tainan Gang has become a dominant force under his banner. The Vietnam Gang and the Seven Stars Gang also didn't look at each other, and they even followed their own orders somewhat. This made him very unhappy. What he needs is an obedient dog, and now this dog is too full. Sometimes he would bar his teeth at his owner because he was protecting food, which he couldn't bear. It would be better to raise a guard dog again, and it would be more interesting for the two dogs to fight. Titu nodded. Now the East China group has been repelled, and Chinatown has been completely captured by the Tainan Gang. He had no choice but to come to Iguchi Tozei. After all, Iguchi Tozei was the master of the Tainan Gang. Why should I help you? Iguchi Toshinari asked in half-baked Chinese. When Titu heard this, his face looked a little ugly. The East China group had no leverage at all. Mr. Iguchi, whatever you need, as long as our East China group can get it, we won't hesitate. Iguchi Toshinari's eyes lit up. This was what he was waiting for. I want you to promise me and do something for me. I want the entire East China group to join the Triad Iguchi group. Iguchi Tozei stretched his eyebrows and leaned lazily on the backrest. Titu thought about it for a long time and knew that if he didn't agree, Iguchi Tozei would not help East China organize it. Okay, I promise you. But I need time for the East China group to join the Jiangkou group. After all, the organization does not belong to me alone. Titu said in a deep voice. Iguchi Toshinari took a serious look at Titu, and he immediately realized that Titu was not a qualified leader. He has the temperament of a big brother, but he doesn't have the abilities of a big brother and is hesitant to do things. But he turned around and thought, isn't this the talent he needs? As long as this kind of person finds his weakness, he is easier to control than ordinary people. Okay, I will tell the Tainan Gang. But I don't give you much time, so you can think about it yourself. Remember, your organization is dispensable to me. Iguchi Tozei nodded his head, and the words had been spoken. He believed that no matter what the East China group discussed, there would only be one result in the end, and that was to agree to the merger. Returning to the gathering place, Titu was immediately surrounded by a group of people. Titu, how are you? Will Iguchi help? The Tainan Gang is too cruel. A group of people all had injuries on their bodies, and Titu could still smell the smell of disinfectant. He knew that this group of people had been frightened by the Tainan Gang. Iguchi agreed, but the condition is that the East China group merges with the Iguchi group of the Triad. Everyone was stunned when they heard Titu's words. Xiang Jiangzi, who had just walked in, also heard these words and objected loudly, what are you doing? If we join the Jiangkou group, what's the difference between us and those Tainan Gang gangsters who forget their ancestors? Everyone was silent when they heard Xiang Jiangzi's words. Titu's face was livid. Most of the people here were from the northeast, and their ancestors had a blood feud with the Japanese. This is also the reason why the East China group has been unwilling to affiliate with Japanese gangs. You're about to die, why do you care about that? I don't know who said it secretly. Yeah, let's get over the difficulties first. At least it's better than being exploited by the Tainan Gang. That's right, let's survive first and then talk about it later. Someone took the lead, and others also started talking. What are you doing? Have you forgotten our original intention of establishing the East China Group? Xiang Jiangzi looked at everyone with a look of disbelief. Then he said, Master Qing, you have decided to help us. Don't be stupid, Xiang Jiangzi. Help? How to help? He is the boss of Xiangjiang society, what can he do in Japan? The Taibao muttered quietly. Stop talking. Xiao Dai also pulled Xiang Jiangzi's sleeve. Now that most people have agreed to merge into the Jiangkao group, they will not listen to anything Xiang Jiangzi says. The courage of these people has been defeated. When Titu saw that most people agreed, he nodded and quickly contacted Iguchi Toshinari. Iguchi Tose got the news from Titu and smiled. He knew that the opponent would not refuse, and he could take advantage of the conflict between the Tainan Gang and the East China Group to firmly control the two Chinese organizations. Although the East China Group is not nearly as strong, doesn't it still have its own strength? Throw in a few bones and fatten up. Brother, I don't think you should use outsiders so much, Nakajima said softly. Nakajima, Iguchi Toshinari's deputy, is a typical Japanese and extremely xenophobic. He has always been hesitant about Iguchi Toshinari's decision. Iguchi was once persuaded to give up using forces other than the Japanese. Nakajima, times have changed, and violent gangs have always been developing. Why do you think the three major violent gangs can develop overseas? It's not possible to rely solely on domestic people. Iguchi Toshi said earnestly. This Nakajima is very capable of doing things, but the Japanese people are inherently xenophobic. Sometimes he even dislikes his wife Xiaoxio's identity. Even though Xiaoxio is a descendant of orphans from World War II. Hi, a trace of disapproval flashed in Nakajima's eyes, but he still said respectfully. Mr. Iguchi, what did you say? Let us evacuate Chinatown. Gao Ji sat in a wheelchair, holding the phone and speaking incredibly loudly. In order to capture Chinatown, dozens of brothers from the Tainan Gang were killed and injured, and now Iguchi Toshinori ordered him to withdraw with just one sentence. Gao Sang, the East China Group is now our brother, so please restrain yourself. Iguchi Toshinori's voice came from the phone. Mr. Iguchi, our attack on the East China Group was approved by you. Now. Gao Sang, don't say more. As for the compensation issue, I have made an agreement with the East China Group and they will compensate you for your losses. Exit Chinatown now. Beep. The busy tone came from the mobile phone. You old boy, Gao Ji was so angry that he smashed his cell phone to pieces. Chinatown had obviously been defeated by him, but he was ordered to evacuate during the time when he was picking peaches. Iguchi was obviously afraid that the Tainan Gang would be too powerful to control, so he deliberately suppressed himself. Let's get out of Chinatown. Gao Ji said with a gloomy face. Maid, before you leave, search China Street for me. Gao Ji, who was getting angrier as he thought about it, ordered. When the Tainan Gang heard this, they immediately rushed into the shops in Chinatown and started searching, even the steel porcelain. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Bulletin Liang. Chapter 197. After Li Qing's instruction, Yamamoto killed a few thorns and showed off a large amount of US$. The young people who were angry with Luo Quan all said that they would follow Kenji Yamamoto in the future. Aja's new recruitment plan was also very smooth. Basically, all the Chinese young people who had no relatives or friends agreed to join. After all, they had no food to eat, so who cared about whether it was a violent group? In terms of organizational structure, Li Qing continues to use the New World's organizational structure. After all, the New World's organizational structure is relatively advanced in the entire world. This is one of the reasons why the New World boys are so loyal. Brother, we have recruited almost 500 people now. Most of them are young people and they have very strong fighting ability. Crow whispered the report next to Li Qing. Li Qing smiled and nodded, they are all a group of stupid young people. It is the right time to strike lightly, so their combat effectiveness is certainly strong. He rubbed the lighter in his hand, and now his first step was successful without any major accidents. The next step is to find opportunities to intervene in Chinatown, and then use Chinatown as the center point and slowly radiate to the surrounding areas. Especially those places where Chinese people gather. As far as he knows, most of the places where Chinese people gather are old rented shabby houses, and there are very few Japanese people around. You can spend money to buy it and use it as a base. Big brother? Big brother. The crow cawed several times, interrupting Li Qing's train of thought. Look at the name of our violent gang in Japan. Without a name, there is no sense of identity. Crow spread his hands. This was what Aja and Yamamoto asked him to ask. Name. Li Qing frowned. Call Aoki Gumi and do as the Romans do. Crow secretly smacked his tongue. Eldest brother is indeed a useless name, it's not as good as King Muhal. By the way, Crow, tell Aja and Yamamoto to find a group of boys who can ride motorcycles. They don't need to be many, but they must be ruthless. Li Qing thought for a while and said to Crow. He had this idea inspired by the Japanese bosozoku. Motorcycles, a type of transportation, are fast and flexible, and are essential for establishing a mobile team. Brother, do you want to establish? Crow's eyes lit up, and he instantly guessed his eldest brother's plan. Yes, I want to set up a mobile team called the Rampage Angels, specifically responsible for assassinations. Li Qing's eyes were shining, and he looked at the crow with burning eyes. Brother, this name. Isn't it great? Why not call it Rampage Demon? If Dong Su were here, he would definitely roll his eyes because both names are rubbish. Everything was arranged according to Li Qing's instructions, and the establishment of the Aoki group did not cause any splash in Tokyo. There are countless unknown small violent groups like the Crucian Carp crossing the river, and I don't know when they will disband. As for the formation of the Rampage Angels, Li Qing is very concerned about it, which is very important for the development of the next plan. I thought everything would go smoothly, but Xiang Jiangzi's words disrupted Li Qing's plan. You mean, the East China group has now become a subordinate violent group of the Triads? Li Qingyin had a sullen face, took a deep drag on his cigarette, and stared at the restless Xiang Jiangzi opposite him. You still remember what you promised me, right? Is this how you trust me? Although his tone did not fluctuate, it made Xiang Jiangzi break out in cold sweat. Master Qing, please listen to my explanation. It was already too late when I went back. I didn't expect that Ironhead actually convinced Iguchi Toze. Xiang Jiangzi lowered his head, not daring to look at Li Qing. It was like a big stone was pressed in his throat, making him unable to breathe. Iguchi Toshinari. Li Qing whispered the name. The room fell into deathly silence again, and Xiang Jiangzi even tried his best to suppress his breathing. Originally, the Tainan gang was under Iguchi Toze, and Li Qing did not expect that Iguchi Toze would order the Tainan gang to withdraw from Chinatown. It seems that Iguchi Toshinari also has other ideas. Yes, such an opponent is interesting. Li Qing thought for a while and laughed. During this period of time, everything went smoothly, which gave him the illusion that he could predict everything. It seemed that others were not necessarily fools. This incident just reminded him not to underestimate anyone. Okay, I understand. You go back first and pay close attention to the movements of the East China group and Iguchi Toshinari. If there is anything strange, tell me immediately. Don't worry, I won't treat you badly. Li Qing said with a smile, his tone much more relaxed. Xiang Jiangzi let out a light breath and relaxed his whole body. He also knew that he was not doing well this time, and he was mentally prepared to be punished. Unexpectedly, Master Qing would pass by lightly. Master Qing, Don't worry, if there is any situation, I will report it to Brother Crow immediately. Xiang Jiangzi nodded and walked out of the office door. After Xiang Jiangzi walked out, Wu Yao asked, "Brother, this kind of person has to be brave but not brave, and he has to be skillful but not skilled. Why do you use him?" Li Qing took the cigarette in his hand and lit the crow. "If you are narrow-minded, this person will always be useful. So big brother, what should we do about Chinatown?" Crow also knows the plan, and taking Chinatown is the top priority. "Don't worry, our plan is still too conservative, and we don't necessarily have to find a reason to intervene in the Chinatown dispute. Now we have to take the initiative. If there are no conditions, then create conditions." Li Qing smiled mysteriously. Crow didn't know his elder brother's plan, but he scratched his head and laughed. "Ao, are you arriving tonight?" Li Qing asked. "Well, Kuromi Port, Tokyo, about 11 o'clock in the evening." "Okay, let's go pick up Ao together tonight." After all, the plan in Li Qing's mind can't be carried out until Ao and others arrive. Late at night, the color of the sea water is like black ink. At first glance, it looks like a huge mouth of an abyss, which makes people shudder. Kuromi Port is a small port, with only a few small-ton cargo ships docked. The slight sound of the motor sounded and disappeared when it reached the dock. Suddenly a few lights flashed from the dark water. Crow took out the flashlight he had prepared long ago and called the signal according to the agreed-upon code. After a while, a cargo ship slowly docked. Several strong men stepped off the freighter. Judging from their walking posture, it was obvious that they had been trained. "Brother." Ao put down his luggage and walked towards Li Qing. "Ao, it's been a hard journey." Li Qing also stepped forward to hug him, and then greeted young master, Beizu, and others. "Young master, I heard that the operation was quite successful." "Not bad." Li Qing patted the young master on the shoulder. "It's all thanks to my sister-in-law. She found the best plastic surgeon in Korea for me." Li Qing had specifically asked Mao Xianmin about the young master's plastic surgery. After all, his little brother, this small matter was nothing. "Let's go, let's talk on the way. Let me introduce you to some new friends," Li Qing said with a smile. The group of people chatted and laughed as they got into the car and drove towards the hotel. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Bulletin Liang. Chapter 198. Ao, this is Aja, Yamamoto. Li Qing introduced with a smile. The stall is getting bigger and bigger, and now the younger brothers in different areas are not very familiar with each other. He plans to hold a group meeting when he has time to let everyone get to know each other. The two young men hurriedly paid tribute to Ao, as Brother Crow had explained to them before. This brother Ao was his right-hand man in prison and is now responsible for the security of Hejian Casino. "Brother Ao, I'm Aja." "Brother Ao, just call me Yamamoto." Ao smiled and patted the two of them on the shoulders and gave them a few words of encouragement. The group sat down and chatted while eating. When he was almost done eating, Li Qing put down his chopsticks and wiped his mouth. The others immediately put down their chopsticks and waited for him to speak. "Ao, I have called you here for two reasons." Ao straightened up immediately and said seriously, "Brother, please tell me." "The first is to help me train the Rampage Angel mobile team. The Rampage Angel not only needs to be proficient in motorcycle driving skills, but also needs to train the accuracy of shooting while driving at high speed. These are exercises that take a long time. The second is the assassination mission, mainly the key members of each gang. I will ask the Crow to give you the list tomorrow, and I will tell you the time of the operation later." Li Qing's eyes flashed. He wanted to completely disrupt the existing hidden rules of the Japanese violent gangs. In this way, the Aokigumi can establish a new system on the ruins. Ao nodded when he heard this, curled his lips and smiled. finally able to show off his skills. It was too comfortable in Hejiang during this period, and they gained several pounds. This is not the life they want. Weapons and munitions, tell the crow what you need. Li Qing lit a cigarette and said. Ao patted the package behind him and said, don't worry, brother, we'll all take it with us if we can get it. Ao's group is different from Tianyang Sheng. The American equipment they have used since the beginning of training is not suitable for Mazi's weapons. Okay, have a good rest today. Let's start training those little cubs tomorrow. Li Qing's words caused a burst of laughter. Ao and others were all gearing up and couldn't wait to beat the young people. Aja, Yamamoto will also join the training. Yamamoto has arranged the location. The two people who were still laughing stupidly along with the others could no longer laugh anymore and nodded bitterly. That's right, young wolves in a wolf pack must have adult wolves to teach them hunting skills. This is inheritance. Li Qing returned to his room. Lily was lying on her side on the bed reading a magazine. When she saw Li Qing come in, she immediately sat up happily. Li Qing kissed her fragrant lips, sat on the sofa a little tiredly, and pinched the tingling temples. Upon seeing this, Lily stood up immediately, came behind him, and massaged his head. At this time, the cell phone ringing next to Li Qing rang, and Lily glared angrily, who is it so late? Very few people know Li Qing's mobile phone number, except for his die-hard brother and his own woman. Picking up the phone and looking at the number, Li Qing smiled. Heavenly health. It seems that I have some clues about what I asked Tianyang Sheng to inquire about. After connecting the phone, Tianyang Sheng's voice came from the other side. Hey, big brother. Don't know what? Li Qing heard Tianyang Sheng's voice on the opposite side was a little trembling and had a serious nasal sound. Li Qing's eyes narrowed and he said calmly, well, don't be in a hurry when it comes to healthcare. Speak slowly. Brother, according to your request, I have been searching for traces of gas bombs and bacterial bombs left by the Japanese army in World War II in Ukraine and Russia. Li Qing nodded. He indeed arranged for Tianyang Sheng to try to find chemical weapons previously manufactured by the Japanese army. The purpose is also very simple, treat the other person's body with his own way. Give these right-wingers a taste of their own gas bombs. Tianyang Sheng continued, in a chemical warehouse in the Far East, we found poison gas bombs that have not been destroyed. At the same time, he also discovered experimental records of poison gas and bacteria by the Japanese army. It was this record that allowed him to break through the defense. The Japanese army was simply inhumane. Listening to Tianyang Sheng's words, Li Qing did not speak, but gritted his teeth tightly. Brother, I am going to Japan. I will never let those war fanatics off easily. I will make them, their sons, and their grandsons pay for the crimes they committed in China. Tianyang Sheng's voice was firm. They were originally war orphans. If their parents had not died in the war, they would probably have their own happy life. Li Qing closed his eyes and thought for a moment. Yang Sheng, don't come to Japan now. Get the gas bombs and germ bombs that are still usable. Don't worry. I will never let anyone who commits crimes in China go. Some gas bombs and bacterial bombs can no longer be used because they have been used for too long. Tianyang Sheng specially asked relevant experts to check them, and some of them were relatively intact and could still function. As for Li Qing not letting Tianyang Sheng and others come to Japan, he also had his own considerations. First, the target was too big. Tianyang Sheng and others were already on the Interpol blacklist and were easily discovered, which would lead to the failure of his plan. Second, Ukraine cannot do without Tianjin. After all, the continuous arms transactions require someone to take charge. Tianyang Sheng listened to Li Qing's instructions and suppressed the anger in his heart. He knew that he should put important things first. The two chatted for a few more words before hanging up the phone. Li Qing put down his phone, with a hint of murderous intent in his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curved to reveal cold white teeth. New grudges and old grudges, let's collect some interest later. Just when Ao and others were training the violent angels step by step, Li Qing called Xiang Jiangzi. Xiang Jiangzi reported the recent situation of the East China Group and the Triad Jiangkao Group to Li Qing. Since the East China Group merged into the Triad Iguchi Group, they have been controlling various resources in Chinatown, which has really made things easier for the East China Group. At the same time, frictions between the Iguchi Group and the Togawa Group within the Triad continued, mainly because of the issue of pachinko's ownership. You must know that apart from the D category, pachinko is the most profitable. The two Triad groups are constantly competing for pachinko, and it has even reached the point of using guns. After hearing this, Li Qing nodded slightly, with a sneer on his lips. Okay, Xiang Jiangzi, I have a task for you. Xiang Jiangzi stood up immediately. Master Qing, as you command, I will go through fire and water without hesitation. He knew that this was an opportunity to perform. If he could successfully complete King Yi's mission, he might be able to join the Aoki group. Do your job, go to Iguchi Toshinori's office and pick up a few of his iconic things. Li Qing said in a deep voice. Since there is a conflict between the Iguchi group and the Togawa group, then simply let the conflict intensify. Dog eats dog is a good thing. Hearing this, Xiang Jiangzi nodded. This matter was difficult for him, but it was not impossible to accomplish. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 199. Xiang Jiangzi's theft plan went very smoothly. He found a gold watch engraved with his name and a box of personal business cards in Jiangguka Liken's safe. This kind of personal business card is made of gold, and a thin one is worth about 100,000 yen, so people who are not particularly important cannot get this kind of business card. Even each business card has a special number on it. Ao, this person is Taro Watakawa. He will be active in Rhyming Tavern at night. Your task is to kill him. Li Qing handed Ao's photo of Taro Watakawa. Ao took a look at the photo and nodded, brother, don't worry. This matter is very simple for Ao, it is nothing more than long-range sniping. Li Qing handed him a gold watch and half a business card. Leave these two things nearby. Good. Li Qing's move was an obvious attempt to frame the blame. Whether it was true or false, the Togawa team didn't care. After all, Watakawa Kinhei, whose father died, needed someone to vent to. As night fell, the light rain kept falling. Ao lay motionless on the rooftop not far away. This was the best position for sniping. The only drawback was that it was raining and windy tonight. So Ao arranged for the young master to be on standby on the rooftop of another building with another sniper rifle to ensure that the assassination plan was foolproof. At about 8 o'clock in the evening, Taro Watakawa walked out of the Rhyming Tavern surrounded by everyone. There was a younger brother holding an umbrella behind him, which made Ao temporarily unable to find an angle to snipe from. Finally, at the moment Taro Watakawa took out his cigar, Ao's sniper rifle with a silencer fired. He just glanced at it through the magnifying glass and started to pack up his sniper rifle. According to this distance, Taro Watakawa will die. He casually dropped his gold watch and half a business card and walked downstairs quickly. Watagawa Kinhei, who was standing next to Watagawa Taro, felt his face heat up and saw his father falling straight down. Sniper! Watakawa Kinhei shouted, using all his body to protect Watakawa Taro who fell on the ground. But it was useless at this time, there was already a big hole in Taro Watagawa's brain. Father! Watakawa Kinhei screamed in pain. That direction, the rooftop. Don't let him escape. Watakawa Kinhei endured his grief and ordered his younger brother to go to the rooftop to outflank the killer. 5 minutes later, the doctor who came to the rescue shook his head regretfully. Watakawa Kinhei pursed his lips tightly and said nothing. Until the younger brother came over with a broken gold watch and half a business card with only a number but no name. Seeing the name engraved on the gold watch, Watakawa Kinhei roared, "Iguchi Toshinari, I will make you pay the price." He has lost his mind now and just wants to find an outlet. He doesn't care whether Iguchi Toshinari is the real murderer or not. Now he must be the murderer. Start attacking the Iguchi group. Hi. All the younger brothers have the fire of revenge in their eyes, and they want the Iguchi group to pay for their blood debt. All of a sudden, all the members of the Togawa group began to take action and attack the Iguchi group's territory, especially the entertainment venues with relatively good business. The members of the Iguchi group who had no time to react had already been shot to death by more than a dozen people in a short period of time. Even Iguchi Toshinari's home was attacked by the Togawa group. "Shiu, take the child to the basement." Iguchi Toshinari lowered his head, holding a pistol in his hand, and kept firing back at the people outside the window. He had just informed Nakajima to come over for support, and he was expected to arrive soon. "Baga, is Duchuan crazy? He actually sent someone to kill me." Iguchi Toshinari didn't know what was going on, and members of the Togawa group attacked him like mad dogs. If the two bodyguards hadn't left yet, his entire family would have been forced to confess here today. Gunfire started again outside the house, and it seemed that Nakajima was bringing people to support him. After waiting for a while, Iguchi Toze dared to stick his head out. "The people of the Togawa group have retreated. What's going on with Nakajima? The people crossing the river are attacking us crazily," Iguchi Toshinari asked Nakajima, who was walking towards him. "Brother, I received news that all our territory has been swept away. Taro Watakawa is dead, and Kinhei thinks it was our Iguchi group who did it." "Well, Taro Watagawa is dead." Iguchi Toshinari was stunned for a moment, realizing that the matter was not simple. During this period of time, there was constant friction between the Iguchi group and the Togawa group. Taro Totagawa died at this time, and Totagawa Kinhei might have had some misunderstanding. Nakajima looked hesitant and asked softly, "Brother, are you sending the Vietnamese gang?" "Baga, it's not me. You stupid pig." Iguchi Toshinori was furious and slapped Nakajima on the face. Nakajima staggered and almost fell, his cheeks visibly swollen. "Hi." Nakajima quickly lowered his head, a trace of hatred flashed in his eyes. "It's not me." "Don't say such words again." Iguchi Toshinari also realized that he had overacted and softened his tone. "Nakajima, please inform the Vietnam gang, Tainan gang, and East China group to attack the Duchuan group immediately. No matter what, it's not his character not to give back when he's beaten." "Hi, I'll go down and make arrangements right away." As time goes by, the internal disputes within the triads tend to intensify. On the territory of the two groups, gun battles occurred almost every day, and the number of casualties was increasing. Muranishi, the president of the Triad Society, couldn't sit still. Mainly because the Japanese police talked to him several times, and because of the instructions of Emperor Tehereta, he, as a puppet, had to mediate. Triad headquarters. "That's enough for you, Watakawa Kinhei. There's no need to worry about the crime of imposition. I said it wasn't me." Iguchi Toshinari said angrily. This Watakawa Kinhei bit him like a mad dog and wouldn't let go. He was simply hopeless. "It's not you. Why did I find your gold watch and business card on the rooftop?" Chiangping glanced at Iguchi with disdain. "Baga, this is an obvious frame-up, can't you see? They want us to fight among ourselves, maybe it's other forces." Iguchi Toshinari explained. In fact, the rape was not invisible, it was just an opportunity to exploit. Before the real murderer was found, Iguchi was the murderer and must be the murderer. This is not only to show to outsiders, but also to give an explanation to his father's confidants. Jiangping still clings to Jiangkao. Okay, if you continue to fight like this, Mr. Teherada will be very dissatisfied. Let's do this, Iguchi, you compensate the Togawa group for their losses and apologize to Togawa. After all, Taro is dead. Muranishi shook his head and quietly touched the check in his pocket that Totakawa Kinhei had given him. President Muranishi, why? Iguchi Toshinari opened his eyes wide and looked at Muranishi unconvinced. This is Mr. Teherada's decision. Do you have any objections? Muranishi's tone increased and he stared directly at Iguchi Toshinari. Jianguka still wanted to speak, but his Adam's apple twitched twice, but he still didn't say anything. This made the members of the Iguchi group look ugly. The Togawa group suddenly attacked, resulting in the death and injury of many brothers in the group. Now their boss has to compensate and apologize to the other party, which is a bit unacceptable to them. Hong Kong movies, I can see the loyalty value, I am not panicked at all. Author, Ban Wanqing Buletin Liang. Chapter 200. You said we killed Watagawa Taro. What evidence do you have? Why should we apologize? Nakajima stood up and shouted angrily. Iguchi's gold watch and business card are not evidence. I will kill you, you beast. Watagawa Kyohei stood up and hit Nakajima. Nakajima was not to be outdone and fought back. The scene became chaotic and the two sides began to confront each other again. Don't argue. If you argue again, you all go out. We want to sit down and talk, not let you fight on the spot. President Muranishi patted the table and the scene became quiet. Iguchi, I know you have always had intentions on the business in Kansai. Now you can't wash off the suspicion of killing Watagawa Taro. In order to avoid infighting in the triad, you apologize and hand over the pachinko business to the Watagawa group. Muranishi asked Iguchi to give up his own interests for the unity of the entire triad. Everyone looked at Iguchi Toshinari, only to see that his face was ashen, and he tried his best to suppress his anger and stood up from the sofa. Iguchi Toshinari bowed slightly in the direction of Watakawa Kyohei, and walked out of the office with Nakajima and others. Watakawa Kyohei looked at his back with a smile. Thank you for the support of President Muranishi, there will be gifts later. Kyohei bowed respectfully to Muranishi to express his gratitude. Haha, you have to take good care of the Watakawa group. Mr. Teherada thinks highly of you. Muranishi's eyes condensed and he smiled. Watakawa Kyohei nodded and walked out with his people. At this time, Nakajima, who had just got on the car, asked anxiously, Brother, is the pachinko business really given to the Watakawa group? You should know that most of the Iguchi group's funding sources are centered around pachinko, and all kinds of pornography and usury are inseparable from pachinko. If the Watakawa group really takes over pachinko, they may not even be able to eat. Don't worry, if you want pachinko, he has to be alive. Iguchi Toshinari smiled sinisterly. Call Tita from the East China group. Nakajima was stunned when he heard this, but he still nodded obediently. He was a little disappointed that his elder brother trusted outsiders but not his own people. Tita came to Jiankao Liken's house again after receiving the news. Looking at Xiaoxiu, who already had children, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Mr. Jiankao, what do you want to talk to me about? Titu asked. Jiankao Liken glanced at Titu and Xiaoxiu with a smile. Do you still remember what you promised me? Last time he helped the East China group, one of the conditions was to ask Titu to do something for him. Titu nodded expressionlessly. Okay, I want you to kill 2 people. Jiankao raised his head and looked at Titu. Titu looked solemn, as if he was thinking about something. Who to kill? Watakawa Kyoshige and Chairman Muranishi. After a long silence, Titu said, I can help you, but you have to agree to one of my requests. Iguchi Toshinari frowned, but still agreed. As long as the condition was not excessive, he could give it to Titu. I want a long-term residence permit. Iguchi Toshinari smiled, haha, it seems that we not only have the same aesthetic taste, but also have similar courage. He said this as a compliment. After all, not everyone has such courage to kill the president and leader of the triad. This is a mission of life and death. Under the arrangement of Iguchi Toshinari, Titu acted quickly and killed Chairman Muranishi in just a short time. But Watakawa Kiyashige was not so smooth. Since Watakawa Taro was assassinated, Kiyashige has a group of younger brothers to protect him wherever he goes, even when he goes to the toilet. After several failed assassinations, Jiankao knew that there was no chance and could only stop the assassination plan for Jiangping. Brother, it must be that guy Jiankao Liken who did it, the younger brother of the Watagawa group shouted loudly. Watagawa Jiangping sat on the sofa in silence. He knew who killed Muranishi and knew that several assassinations were also arranged by Jiankao. The competition for the pachinko business has reached a fever pitch. Since Muranishi died, the two sides have returned to the state of fighting. Do you know Gao Ji from the Tainan gang? Jiangping touched his chin and asked in a deep voice. The younger brothers looked at each other and shook their heads. The Watagawa group has always been more repulsive to external forces and rarely contacted them. Find someone to invite Gao Ji and say that I hope to meet him. Jiangping thought about it and felt that the best way to defeat the Jiankao group was to cut off the firewood from the bottom. The Jiankao group is complex and has many internal contradictions. As long as he can win them over a little, it will not be a problem to defeat the Jiankao group. Oh, by the way, please make an appointment with Nakajima, the deputy of Jiankao. I heard that he is also very dissatisfied with the current situation of Jiankao group. Jiangping secretly laughed at Jiankao in his heart. Doesn't he know that there is a saying in China that those who are not of my race must have different hearts? Except for the Japanese, no one else can be trusted. Watakawa Jiangping contacted Gao Ji and Nakajima separately and reached an agreement secretly. Agreed to support Nakajima to become the leader of Jiankao group after Jiankao Liken's death. As for the Tainan gang, Gao Ji agreed that as long as Jiankao Liken was successfully killed, everything in the East China group would be handed over to the Tainan gang. At this time, Li Qing was secretly observing the movements of the triad. Recently, he specially asked Crow to find a few local members of the Aoki group to go undercover in the Jiankao group and the Watakawa group. He was well aware of the arrangements of both sides. But it was not the time for the Aoki group to attack. After all, the Aoki group did not have an advantage in numbers compared to the triads. He had to wait until both sides suffered heavy losses before he could make his move. The incident was going as he expected. A few days later, the Watagawa group and the Tainan gang attacked the Iguchi group, the East China gang, and the Vietnam gang at the same time. At the beginning, they were evenly matched, but who knew that Nakajima of the Iguchi group suddenly turned against them and stabbed them in the back. As a result, the Iguchi group was defeated step by step, but Iguchi Toshinari was unwilling to fail. He invited the Sumiyoshi Kai Shiveo group to help him with the Iguchi group's D-product business. For a time, the entire Shinjuku area was in chaos, and the number of deaths every day made the Tokyo police secretly smack their lips. Haha, finally forced Iguchi Toshinari's trump card. Li Qing knew that there must be other forces behind Iguchi Toshinari, otherwise he would not dare to send people to kill Muranishi. It now seems that Iguchi Toshinari is involved with the Sumiyoshi Kai, and may even be a pawn of the Sumiyoshi Kai in the triads. Just when Li Qing was planning to dispatch the Aoki group to finish off the two sides that were both injured, the triad's Emperor Taiyuan Tian mediated, which temporarily shelved Li Qing's plan. After Taiyuan Tian's mediation, the two sides stopped fighting and redivided their spheres of influence. Tisk tisk, this old guy is really in the way. Li Qing, half lying on the chair, the two sides stopped fighting, and it was not in the interests of the Aoki group at all, especially since the Chinatown that he valued was now in the sphere of influence of the Tainan gang. This made him very unhappy. Crow, let Bakuja come. Since Taiyuan Tian came to disrupt the situation, Li Qing didn't mind letting him become a flying man.